Hello everyone, I hope that you all are doing well. Let's start with the today's best practice, which is Minify Client Assets. Now, bundling is a way or a technique to combine the multiple JavaScripts or CSS files into a single file. And minification is a technique to reduce the size of file by removing the white spaces and commented code. Both bundling and minification can be used to improve the performance of web application by reducing the number of requests to server and reducing the size of a requested assets such as a JavaScript file, CSS file, or any kind of images and links, etc. So ASP.NET Core apps with the complex front end and frequently serve many JavaScript, CSS, or image files. The performance of initial load request can be improved by bundling and minification. So bundling, which combines multiple file into one, and minification, which reduces the size of a file by removing white spaces and comments. Now, what are the recommendations? To use the bundling and minification guidelines, which mention compatibility tools and somehow to show how you use the ASP.NET Core's environment tags to handle both development and production environments. Do consider other third-party tools such as a Webpack for complex client asset management. Now, ASP.NET Core applications, we can bundle and minify the client resources such as a JavaScript CSS during the design time using the third-party tools such as a Grunt and Gulp. And doing bundling and minification at design time means that minifying files are created at the time of a development of application. And it is important to reduce the server load. However, it increases the build complexity. Now, bundling and minification improves the performance of a page request load time. Once the browser has requested the web page and cache related assets, bundling and minification do not provide any kind of performance issues on this page. Now, reducing the size of a response usually increases the responsiveness of an app and often dramatically increase the performance. One way to reduce the payload sizes is to compress the app responses. So for more information, we can go ahead with the response compressions also. Now, let's go ahead with the how to minify the client's assets. So minifying client's assets in ASP.NET, client's assets means just JavaScript, CSS, HTML files, and images. Here are several approaches. ASP.NET Core has a built-in support for bundling and minification through the bundler minifier NuGet package, and this allows you to bundle and minify the multiple CSS and JavaScript files. To use it, just you have to install the package and configure it in a bundle config.json file. So first you have to install the package, then create the JSON file, and then build the project and refer to the minified files in your layout. So if you can see in this example, it's we just added this package and then we are configuring that in a JSON file, and instead of using normal site.css, we are using the minified version of a site.min.css. So it will reduce the size, and let's go ahead. Minify static files in a production. So ASP.NET Core automatically shows the minified files in a production mode when using the use static file middleware. So how to use it? Add the use static file middleware in your startup.cs. Create the minified version of your CSS and JS file using the preferred method by using Webpack and a bundler minifier. And when the app runs in a production, make sure to serve the minified version of your file. So let's go ahead with the things like minifying assets. So enable response compression. In addition to minify the assets, you can enable the response compression in ASP.NET Core to further reduce the size of assets sent to the client. Alternative thing, you can use the CDN, minify assets or offload them to the CDN for the faster delivery, content delivery network. Many CDNs like Cloud, Azure, and offer automatic minification of your CSS and JS or client assets and manually minify the using online tools. If you prefer a simpler approach, you can manually minify your assets using online tools like whatever the online tools available for the JavaScript, CSS, minifier for the CSS files, and you then manually upload the minified files to your project. Next, minify the Razor views can contain the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, which can be minified. However, the ASP.NET does not automatically minify the Razor views, so you can use the third-party tool like Web Markup Min or minify the output of your views. Now, minifying assets, minification by using the Visual Studio and use Webpack, Gulp, or Advanced Assets Management for the minification and bundling. For more advanced assets bundling and minification, you can go ahead with the third-party libraries like Webpack and Gulp to automate the process. Bundling and minification are two distinct performance optimizations, and you can apply in a web app. Used together, bundling and minification will improve the performance by reducing the number of server requests, reducing the size of the requested static assets, and etc. Now, let's go ahead. Before minimize exceptions, let's see what exactly the things mentioned about the minification in a ASP.NET Core documentation. So what is bundling and minification? Bundling and minification in detail, and consider the following JavaScript function and reduces the function to the following. So in this way we have written, there are lots of comments, non-used codes are there, and minification will here, it's mentioned here, and in this way the minification will happen. So it is really impactful. Bundling and minification. So the following table outlines differences between the individual loading assets using the bundling and minification for the typical way. So without, it's 18 file requests, 18 with bundling and minification, 17 reduction, 61%. Byte transfer to 56, it here 156, 41% reduction. Load time is 2360, here 885, and 63% reduction. So load time improved, but these examples run locally. Okay. Greater performance gains are realized when using bundling and minifications with the asset transfer over the network. The test app used to generate the figures in a preceding table and demonstrate the typical improvements that might not apply to the given app. We recommended testing an app to determine with bundling and minification is improved. Now choose a bundling and minification strategies. Okay, so whether you can go ahead with the ASP.NET Core, then there are some third-party tools like Gulp and Webpack. When you click here, the related links would get open. You can visit and you can go ahead with the technology if you want to. Where we are? Yeah. So environment-based bundling. So as a best practice, bundle and minification files of your app should be used in a production environment. So during the development itself, the original files makes for the easier debugging of the app. So specify which files to include in your pages by using environment tag helpers in your view. So environment tag helpers only renders its content when they're running in a specific environment. So like this, the following environment tag renders. So here it is, includes development. So the tag renders the unprocessed CSS file when running the development environment. So like this also we can specify. The following environment tag renders the bundle and minified the CSS file running in an environment other than the developer, exclude development. So in this way, you can specify which file should be rendered when. So there are some additional resources and tag helpers. If you want to visit, you can go ahead with it. Now let's start with the next uh, best practice. Okay, and that is nothing but a minimize exceptions. So in a previous video also we have considered this is the best practice to minimize the exception. Now why and how? Let's go ahead, let's understand. Now exception should be rare. Either write a code in such a way that it should not generate the exception. Find out the ways, find out the different scenarios where exception may occur. In that case, you can create your own custom exception or just use the defined exceptions in a framework. So again, the first line is exception should be rare. Write a code in such a way that it should not generate the exception. Throwing and catching exception is a slow relative to other code flow patterns. Because of its exception shouldn't be used to control the normal program flow. Recommendation: do not use throwing and catching the exception as a means of a normal program flow, especially in a hot code path. You can take care of the things, but try to write the code in such a way that no exception should occur. Do include logic in the app to detect the handle the conditions that could cause an exception. Do throw or catch the exception for unusual, unexpected conditions. Okay. App diagnostic tools such as application insights can help to identify the common exception in an app and that may affect the performance. Here are the concise approach to minimize the exception in a ASP.NET. Use proper validation. Okay. How to minimize the exception? By taking care of the all the things. So what are the things you have to take care of? Use proper input validations. Obviously, you have to validate all user inputs, both client as well as server side, and this prevents the malformed data from causing exception later in your application. Implement error handling and logging. Set up a robust logging system to capture and record the exception, and this helps in a debugging, identifying what went wrong and recurring issues. Handle null references. So simply if you have to add if and else, check it. With null conditional operators, use the null conditional operator and different if and else, or you can say the conditional and ternary operators for the checking. Use try catch block judiciously and wrap the code may throw the exception in a try and catch block, but only where you can meaningfully handle the exception if occurs. So avoid using try catch as a control flow mechanism. Okay, it should not handle or it should not control the flow of your execution, only the security purpose. Okay, what if the exception occurs? In that case only this thing should be executed. It should not handle the actual flow of your application. Implement global error handling. Use application error in a global ASX or your configuration middleware file and to catch the unhandled exception at the application level. Use proper execute exception types. Throw and catch the specific exception types rather than the generic exception object. Okay. Avoid soloing the exception. Don't catch the exception. Do nothing. If you catch the exception, at least log it or rethrow it if you can't handle it in appropriately. Implement secure coding practices. Follow the security best practices to prevent the exception caused by the security vulnerability, such as those SQL injections or a cross-site scripting. Okay. So let's go ahead. So these are the approaches by using which we can minimize the exception. Now let me explain each and every example in more detail. Use a proper input validation. So input validation, the process user methods checks for the null or empty username, which validates the age range between the processing. So it's a process the valid input. Okay, if these things happen, then you have to return the view. Otherwise, go ahead and process the related data. Next, minimize the exception error logging. Error logger class provides a centralized way to log exceptions, which can be called from various parts of your application. So wherever you want, you can go ahead with this particular log exception class and error logger class. Null handling, the get user email method uses null conditional operator. Here you can see user contact email. And if no, then there is a no, if all these things are null, then obviously safely access the nested properties and provide the default value. In such a way, you can handle it. Minimize the exception by using try catch uses. Get user data method demonstrate how to use the try catch blocks to handle the specific exceptions differently. The different catch block for the different exceptions. Global error handling, the application error method in a global ASX catches the unhandled exception at the application level. So you can see here that global application error, this particular method get called. So custom exception types, the user not found, consider there are some scenarios which are limited to your application. So at that time, you have to create your custom exception. Like in this example, they have created user not found exception and is a custom exception that provides more context about the specific error. Next, proper exception handling. The update user method shows how to log an exception and read through it can't be handled at the level. So exception occur, it will go to the catch block, then error logger, log exception. So log the exception and rethrow if you can't handle the exception. So we are throwing it ahead. Next, secure coding. The search method demonstrate input sanitization to prevent the excesses and the use of a parameterized query to prevent the SQL injection. So you can check the code. So I hope that the concepts are clear to you. If you have any questions, we can discuss it in a Q&A session. Take care. Bye-bye. I hope that it will be useful to you all.